I am going to do something similar to what I did with the From games with Monster Hunter Wilds pretty shortly, but I had quite a journey during my playthrough, and my intro sequence basically ballooned into a kind of review, so I'm just going to do that now. I do want to clarify that while this is review-esque, this still won't be a full review. I'm not going to be paying attention to a heap of important mechanics, or really talking about the monsters, since, that's what the other video is. So, I don't know what you want to call this thing. It's a thing where I reflect on my experience with the game overall and make some retrospective qualitative judgments about it. I swear it's not a review, it's a again look. My experience with Monster Hunter Wilds was a, get this, crazy one. Along the way, my feelings moved from a mild disappointment and annoyance to existential despair to pure unfiltered joy. It's been a journey to say the least. As per anyone talking about Monster Hunter on the internet, I guess I need to report my priors. While the series had been on my radar since Tri on the PSP, I am a latecomer to Monster Hunter. I'm one of the kiddies who only jumped on board with World after all the title updates were in, but before the DLC came out. Capcom have a habit of dropping down into my screw it, I'll bite price range at a time that gets me to burn out right before the DLCs hit. So I just never play those, despite loving the main games. Honestly, outside of being burned out and missing out on the expansions because of it, I think it's a fantastic time to do it. The title updates add a lot to these games, especially here. I literally do not give the slightest crap about how the game was too easy or that the endgame systems were too stripped back a year ago. It's outdated criticism, which I get to gleefully ignore because it's just not a thing anymore. In a lot of ways, it's the ideal moment to check out the games in their final states before they're overhauled by the expansions. Which I guess does mean that this will be outdated criticism in a few months as well. But hey, I get to be a time capsule now. Now who can you say has never become anything mum? Regardless, I can't control the flow of time. What matters is that I absolutely adored World. I loved my trek up the grind tree to my crazy endgame builds. I loved all the monsters. I loved the realistic yet whimsical tone. It was a couple hundred hours of the most unparalleled joy I've ever had with a game. Given the format is so long and grindy, it was an experience to put in the treasured memories box instead of try to recapture with replays, but that's fine, because Capcom put out new ones every few years, and I'm not a big replayer anyway. I can just jump on with the new game, mainline it for a couple of months, get my fill to the point of burnout again, and then play the next one in a few years once the withdrawals start kicking in. The system works. After World, I beat and loved Rise, but it wasn't in the same way. I actually think it was more fun to play in terms of combat and monsters. I loved wire bugging around and the tight pace of it immensely, but I didn't get any long-term value out of it. Given how Wilds is played out, I realised I may have just bailed before I unlocked the endgame that I crave, but basically by around 60 or 70 hours, I'd killed everything that I was aware of, and I had my build to a point where I would have just been chasing a few decorations, and I didn't see the value in grinding that out or making extra ones. I still had a great time and don't consider playtime to be an important metric in comparing games, but I did miss that 200 hours of obsessive endgame compulsion. It was a brilliant dose of comparatively light fun, but it didn't have the same impact. Then I had a go at Generations on the Switch, but for reasons that are admittedly largely on me for not giving it the best possible go I could have, I didn't connect with it so much. Part of it was that I really do need those quality of life improvements. Stuff like the damage numbers making the sense of progression feel so much more tangible and making moments of extreme damage output a billion times more cathartic. Or how, while it does make preparation unimportant and rewards laziness, I do much prefer just prepping in the field to quitting and restarting the quest if I forget. It's not a challenge, it's just restarting. And don't get me started on those heinous wait for respawn gathering quests. How'd you guys let those stay in the game for 15 years? Outside of me just being a big modernity baby, the other part of it is that I wasn't playing online, and I get a lot of legs out of the online stuff in Monster Hunter. Ignoring the old-fashioned split between single-player and multiplayer modes, just straight locking me out of a bunch of options without me suffering through half-hour misery battles, my stinginess on NSO had a pretty big impact. I do hunt things solo first in these games, but I find the grinding stage much more fun with other players thanks to the randomness it can create. I'm not still going to be having fun on a 30th solo kill of a boss. I've already had the win to show that I can do it to myself. I don't care that much about perfecting execution beyond that. When I'm part of a team, I feel like I'm contributing to something bigger, and more importantly, maybe I'll get a chuckle out of someone's silly callouts or get the satisfaction of hearing an exasperated 12-year-old berate me for failing a hunt. It adds a lot of legs to a fundamentally repetitive task to me. Knowing that I didn't have that waiting for me at the end, I didn't really put all my heart into it, even on the single-player portion of the game. All in all, I wasn't a fan, but I didn't give it the longest try to adjust to its quirks, so I'm not steadfast in any sort of old Gen is bad stance. Summing up, at the point of coming into Wilds, the series had given me one life has new meaning best thing ever experience, one really enjoyable light fun without much substance experience, and one not for me bounce off it experience. With a steady downwards trend since my glorious first exposure, Wilds had a lot to say in my feelings towards the series overall, really. It could recapture the joy and confirm me as a massive series fanboy, or it could crush the hope out of me that I'd ever recapture that experience again, and have me accept that maybe, just maybe, Monster Hunter isn't my jam after all. In the end, it did both. It's always disappointing when you think you found something that's going to give you a lot of enjoyment for the foreseeable future, but it just kind of peters out instead. Maybe you found a new song that you really liked, only to find out that the band sucks overall. Maybe you went to a new restaurant and had a great entree, only to find that they can't cook mains worth a damn. Maybe you liked Event Horizon, and then decided to check out literally any of the director's other films. It's not really a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's disappointing nonetheless. I had this happen back in the day with Battlefield 2, a game that I spent so much time on during university that it single-handedly killed all of my future career prospects. I felt I was going to be a Battlefield fanboy for life. And I've never really liked any of the other ones. I still check in from time to time. I get shot in the back by people who came from off-screen for a while. Then I spend 2 hours trying to get a turn in a plane. Then I immediately crash it because I forgot how to fly them. And then finally, I say, that was alright. And then I proceed to do literally anything else. I've never been able to recapture that adoring obsession I had for that one entry back in 2005. And it does bum me out. After about 70 or 80 hours, Monster Hunter Wilds had convinced me that I don't actually like Monster Hunter all that much. You can divide a Monster Hunter game into 3 portions: low rank, high rank, and endgame. For 2 of these, Wilds is by far the worst of all the ones I've played. I may have still enjoyed it more than Generations because I'm a sim for modernity, but I would never say it has a better low or high rank than that. At the very least, this pacing does a nice job giving me a structure for this video. I'm going to look through each of these game phases, discussing the stuff that stands out to me in each one, and as a treat, I'm going to cover an extra topic across all of them, which negatively impacts every phase in its own way. I'm not going to tell you what it is, though. I guess you could say that it's a secret. Low rank. Low rank is one that I don't want to be too harsh on, because I don't think there's any real way to make it good. It's not Capcom's fault that I've done 4 of these now, and it's a necessary evil that requires a certain level of total, unrelenting incompetence from the player in order to be exciting. And I'm just never going to be that terrible ever again. I've had my 44-minute low-rank Anjanath experience, and I've come to terms that I'm never getting that again without some kind of traumatic machinery accident with my hands. I like theorizing solutions to problems that I encounter, but I don't have any ideas for this. It needs to exist. New players need onboarding with less brutal stuff. There's a billion systems to learn and introduce, and the game is all about that nothing to powerhouse development, so you can't just kick straight into high rank and start playing around with functional buildcraft right out of the gate. By absolute necessity, we need an opening stanza which is brain-dead easy and has completely obsolete trash gear that it's absolutely only worth crafting to the point that you personally require to reach high rank. Low rank sucks, but it kinda has to suck. I do have some little gripes about how they've gone about it. They front-load the Focus Strike and Offset Attack tutorial in the very first Monster Hunt, and then never bring it up again. The tutorial happened while I was still trying to unlearn Elden Ring's bindings, and I could have used a reminder once I was comfortable with the basics. Elmer is still incessantly telling me that enemies drop slinger ammo 2,000 fights in after all. I didn't learn how Focus Strikes work until I found the bow's auto-targeting one a stupid number of hours in, and then discovered that every single weapon can do it. And I still can't offset worth a damn. They skipped on a few little pleasant mood setters which makes for a worse first impression. There's no zany cats cooking food scene to enjoy, And who thinks that a randomly selected fish in a bucket is a good trade for having a house of your own full of the life that you've captured from the wild? These things are minor in the grand scheme of things, though, so overall it's hard to pick on what it's doing beyond existing in the way that it has to. One area where I can really rag on it, though, is the story. Capcom obviously realised the whole low rank sucks but needs to exist problem, and they came up with the very reasonable idea to prop it up with story stuff. When you can't spruce up the mechanical side of things, why not add some colour to everything around it? It makes sense. The issue is that Monster Hunter is written by the people who write Monster Hunter. To show how low of a starting point this is, here are two things that Wilds has that the prior games do not. A single member of the cast has a character arc. The primary people you interact with have names. Yeah, so this is the level of writing that's being leaned into. As you'd expect from something with such a, well, pathetic standard, it shouldn't come as a surprise to hear that they've basically leaned into the story in the same way that Pokemon has. They've left it exactly as terrible as before, but now there's several times as much of it. To be fair, I don't envy the task in front of them. They're stuck in a gameplay formula which doesn't lend itself to narratives at all. It's a game where you choose what and when to fight, and you return to safety between every single bout. The absorbing ecological focus of making the monsters simply creatures living out in the wild, living their best lives, limits their potential as villainous antagonists. How the hell do you write a story with those constraints? You can't have extended, pressured adventuring, since you need to return to the camp all the time. You can't have a villain with any kind of intention to it without ruining the whole "these are just animals" thing. There's only so many ways that you can say this monster is invasive to the ecosystem. Especially given that our murder squad always shows up into locales that they've never been to and immediately starts slaughtering creatures by the hundreds based on pretty flimsy research. What they've gone for actually makes sense as a narrative. It just doesn't fit into this structure and is written by these writers. This lame-ass kid gets separated from his family by a strange, vicious monster. After running an unreasonably large distance in completely the wrong direction, he's rescued by the Hunter Bros, and heads off with them on their journey through the wilds to find his home. Along the way, he deals with his fear and hatred of the monster to eventually respect it and see himself reflected in the beast. But we still gotta kill its ass because it's a douchebag, giving him an emotional clash between duty and connection. In a different format, it could work. It's basically a God of War style dad and kid adversity adventure title at its most stripped back level, and everyone likes those. The issue is that it doesn't hold up when the kid stays at camp the whole time and you're freely moving around the map without a care in the world. So you end up with that whole arc of him developing that protective bond with the vicious douche dragon that kills everything indiscriminately being covered in like 2 fight intros right at the end. It's pretty stupid. Actually, it's End of Jurassic World 2 stupid. Which, it's Monster Hunter. Who cares? At least they actually tried a little bit here, so that's a win, right? Well, no. At least when you're not trying, you're lazy. To go back to the Pokemon dig earlier, does Legends Arceus actually have a better story than the one in Red and Blue? Or does it just have an infinitely larger cast who talk more? Low commitment can be the better option when you're working with garbage. The vapid non-stories in these games generally move at extremely high paces, basically just introducing monsters and getting on with it. Unsurprisingly, when you don't name your characters, you don't give them a whole lot to say, and when you only have 1 or 2 hubs to fill up, you don't add many of them. Wilds hasn't improved the standards over this, it's just multiplied the quantity by 5. Instead of just having a base camp and then a second gathering hub somewhere, every map section now has its own little village of its own. Each with a cast of vapid losers which need to be introduced and given some boring details about their incomprehensible, crappy towns which don't have any plausible chance of functioning. Then, a monster will do something which is apparently not allowed, like reacting to the weather, so you have to go kill it to protect the natural order. And that just keeps happening over and over. The only character I liked was Olivia's cat, and I don't remember it existing outside of the post-GOG Mazios chat. In addition to drowning you in trash characters and filler dialogue, they've also added a heap of forced walking stuff which infuriated me to no end. I've just gotten to a new world map. I want to gather some new rocks from the mining points and look around, but the game won't let me and forces me to turn around so I can continue the walk and talk garbage. Shut the hell up and let me explore a tiny little bit for Christ's sake. Also, there are no words for how much I hate Alma. Her persistent chirping in with the sarcastic sounding fake chippiness is something that never fades into the background. It just becomes more hateful. I start almost every single quest audibly telling her to shut up. That snarky, "Oh, why don't we try preparing first next time" quip when you weren't even the one who died might be the most bitterly hateful thing anyone has ever put in a game. She's repellent and one of the worst characters ever put in anything. I'm envious of the PC players despite their non-functional performance because I want this mod so bad. The secret, sacred problem of low rank. First up, a mild spoiler for the upcoming scoring-based video about the game. I'm only doing the boss fights. I was initially going to do the levels too, but after I stopped and thought about it for a minute, I realized that all these games have the same levels and they don't matter. Wilds just makes them matter even less than usual. Across the 4 games I played in the series now, the 5 levels that appear in this game have appeared in all the other ones. Desert, forest, volcano, ice, crystal. World had that underground rot cave stage, but otherwise have had the exact same levels over and over. So if they're not going to bother, why should I? It's particularly crazy here because in the story that they wrote for the game, Wyveria is the ruins of an ancient civilization which should be some crazy new place. But it's just a crystal vine cave with basically nothing man-made in it. This isn't me just making things up from scratch that I'd like to see. The story that they wrote says that this place should be some kind of ancient futuristic ruins instead of like the cliffs again, but with a slightly blue tint. Of course, even with there being next to no creativity in the theming in the last, 14 years at the very least, I could have still argued that I could rate the stages based off their layouts and their level quirks. I do kind of want to go off about the incessant turf wars in the basin after all, and that's where the secrets come in. Similarly to Rise, we've been given mounts. Last time we had big friendly doggos, which you still had to control, which basically just let us move fast. Wild has taken the Palamutes out behind the shed so they can spend the last of their days in a nice farm out in the country and replaced them with these reptilian chocobos. On a basic level, they're pretty much the same thing. They run faster than you, so they reduce travel time. Handy stuff. But these ones go a step further. The Palamute was merely an extension of your own controls. You still had to find your way through the level to meet the monster that you were hunting. Rise's levels were extra simple, so it was just kinda like hold up towards the marker, but I viewed Rise as something of an arcadey spin-off, so that was fine for me, with the expectation that the main follow-up would do something a little bit more in-depth. So yeah, they doubled down and now it full-on auto-navigates. Now you press up on the D-pad soon as you load in, and then you just check your phone or whatever until the music kicks in. There's a pretty major chicken or the egg situation in play with this, because Wilds needs this. I was hoping Wilds would ramp up the map complexity from Rise, and boy, did they do that. These levels are basically completely incomprehensible. It's layered to hell with complicated arrays of climbable walls, blind drops, sharp switchbacks, and these scripted looking sequences as the chicken horse jumps between crisscrossing platforms, running up the sides of walls or through hidden tunnels or whatever. I find it basically impossible to make sense of it navigationally. I've done the base camp to Arch-Tempered Arkveld run like 100 times, and I think I'd give myself maybe a 30% chance of being able to replicate it on my own, and that one's not even all that complicated. There's a quest where you need to trigger some little dialogues on various depths of the basin level, and I kept finding myself routed back to the main city so often that I ended up just selecting gathering nodes in the utterly horrendous map to try and get the horse to automatically take me places. It doesn't help that the map's 2 zoom levels are either so distant that you can't make anything out, or so zoomed in that you can't see anything more than 6 feet in front of you. Half the time when I teleport to what looks like the closest camp to a monster to try and save time, I'm on a completely different level of topography, and the horse then takes like 2 minutes navigating completely unfathomable switchbacks and blind drops. Part of it may just be because I am using that auto track so much that I'm not going to internalize things as well as I would have if I manually traveled, but it's such a confusing mess in most areas that I don't think it'd be reasonable to traverse some of these connections without it. So the chicken or the egg thing is simply, did they have the auto exploration mount and build their levels without those pesky constraints of human comprehension, or did they make a complete goddamn mess and then give the horse tracking powers to cover their incompetence? I don't know, and I guess I don't really care. The end result is that I get nothing out of the exploration side of the game now, since I just outsource all of that to the bird, and there's absolutely no reason not to. With low rank being so inherently not very good and the story focused idea being a big whiff, I definitely missed the world exploration and discovery stuff to pick up some of the slack. High rank. But in the end, who really cares about all that? Low rank is like 12 hours long, and Monster Hunter games can last hundreds or thousands of hours. So let's get into the real game with high rank. Oh, it says here that high rank sucks too. The exact borders of what counts as high rank are a bit vague since there's something of a nebulous transfer period between high rank and endgame. It's the second half of the story, which is thankfully much brisker and less talkative, but also the period after that, but before you've gotten all of your endgame mechanics in order. That latter part of the equation is what makes this a little bit fiddly, since quite a few endgame mechanics are unlocked on your way through high rank, so exactly pinpointing the point that you cross over is pretty tough. For the purposes of here, it's basically everything under the 9-star quests, even if some mechanics unlocked in this period may matter heavily to endgame, and the pointy end of 8-star would also count as that also. High rank is always a big step up over low rank, and that remains true here, but it's still limited. This is where build crafting really starts to get going in earnest. Armor sets and weapons that have more skills and more decoration slots. You probably won't have good enough jewels to do much with it yet, but you're actually on the progression ladder now. This phase is definitely functional. I outright dislike low rank, but I merely think high rank is mediocre. The series has a phenomenal method for balancing their gear. As you beat new monsters, new levels are made accessible for each weapon tree, which basically means that weaponry you like can actually stay competitive with later unlocks, statistically at least, which allows for a glorious mix of constant upwards mobility and freedom to lean into whatever interests you. Armor does a similar thing. Obviously, the chances are that you're going to want the armor skills of later gear, but every set has a progressive level up system which lets you keep the earlier stuff in the ballpark, at least numerically. For instance, I took quite a fondness to the Otogoron set for its enhanced burst skill. I just liked it more than the other options I had in the following hours. With this system, I could just level it up and keep my burst build up as I continue my way up the murder tree and things were going well. But then it kind of stalled out at around rank 60, and honestly, if I wasn't making a video on the game, I probably would have dropped it here. I had a similar rut around the same rank in Rise, so maybe they had this mechanic in that one as well and I just didn't comprehend the cause, but the reason here is that they've split some skills into being either weapon skills or armor skills here, whereas in the past any skill could go anywhere. This does actually end up being pretty good in the endgame, but we'll get to that later. For now, it's very limiting. Basically, most of your direct damage and weapon function skills are locked to your weapon. This is your number go up stuff for raw damage and elements, along with things which impact how the weapon works, like charge speed or block quality. There's the potential for a little bit extra from your talisman, but you're likely not going to have very good ones until the endgame. Armor would then be used to handle all of your defensive buffs and the more elaborate, more conditional damage skills like increased wound creation, improved critical hit rate while at full stamina, or boosted damage after dodging. Until the end of the high rank story, I ran a paralysis hammer build. There's obviously a lot that you can do with a combination of a big ass hammer and a status. On the status front, including paralysis boost would give me several more procs per fight, while I could also include critical status to put it into overdrive. And then there's all of the general hammer stuff as well. Knockout power, exhaust, attack up, critical boost, critical eye, charge up. And that's just a very direct weapon. Imagine this on something like a gun lance, which also has defensive and explosive skills to cover in addition to all of that basic number boosting. I basically had the potential to use a mere 3 of these skills at this point of the game. To say the least, the budget is tight. The idea is that it's going to push you into more build variety, which is kinda true in one sense. In World, you can put decorations for all of these skills on any piece of armor, not just your weapon. This allowed you to make a simultaneous attack boosted, weapon skill maxed, constant critical uptime damage bomb. It'd take a while to actually gear it out, but once you had all the decorations required, you could lock in all the constant uptime skills at once, rendering those conditional skills largely obsolete. I mean, why would you take a damage boost after a repeated hit skill, or something that boosts special attacks on wounds when you can just take in 100% critical uptime and double strength crits all the time setup. This is what the system is here to stop. With my paralysis build, I was relying on the burst skill, which boosts damage on successive hits. This impacted my gameplay as I need to focus on rapid hit string combos over the singular big hit method of playing hammer. This is just one option in this class of skills. There's one which boosts your attack after a perfect dodge. Another boosts critical hit rate on a time cycle, but can trigger faster if you take a heap of damage. I could load up on things that boost when I have maximum health and stamina, and pair it with an impenetrable shield. There are sets that automatically inflict you with elements, which you can use to trigger bonuses obtained from recovery, or gain a bonus damage when inflicted. Hell, you could run both and have 100% uptime of some variety. All this stuff actually makes you consider your choices and combat approach, since they're not just all direct, every situation damage boosts. If I could just stack max attack boost and all the critical skills like I can with World, there's really no reason to bother with any of that because, well, the 100% uptime skills are better. The conditional stuff is more fun and interesting to build around, but by its very nature, it's less powerful than stuff which always boosts my output. If Critical Eye gives you a 50% critical hit rate all the time, while Latent Power offers the same boost but on a time cycle, why would anyone use the latter over the former if they didn't have to? This limitation increases the value of these more interesting skills, and it all sounds great. The problem is that builds complete extremely quickly now and have next to no room to grow without the progressive creep of the always best skills. That Monster Hunter World raw damage hell build that everyone had required a heap of very rare and specifically sized decorations to use, so armor pieces would slide around based on what gems that you'd find. You'd find a better decoration that would let you move a skill off the basic armor into the slots, which would let you bring in a replacement armor piece with either different skills or just more efficiency. Sure, you're ending up with a single outcome, but it took time and things moved around a lot before you got there. You may only have had one build, but that build was constantly getting better for dozens of hours straight. The skill restriction model of Wilds nukes the hell out of this kind of semi-random yet constant progressive power gain. You chuck on the armor set with the skills that you want, and then there's not much wiggle room to add much to it. And they'll usually be tied to these other situational skills. The process of putting a build idea together takes very little more than crafting the set itself, and random loot bonuses are difficult to incorporate. With my hammer build, my weapon had an inbuilt exhaust skill, leaving me with room to use 2 more of all of those weapon skills up there. I needed a couple of specific decorations to get it going, but none were particularly rare and I had it covered in a few hours. At this point, I no longer had anything to gain from the RNG decoration system. So with me happy with my status boost and knockout power, no matter how many decorations I get for all the skills that I could theoretically put in there, I would never be able to slot in more than 2 of them. I could get 1,000,000 attack boost 3 gems and it will change nothing. They don't fit. Nothing is going to make them fit. They are worthless. But that's the price of making the armor skills so valuable, and the exact same thing happens with them. There's a set bonus system where you can take in either a pair of 2-piece sets or a single 4-piece set. You pick out a set bonus that you like, the pieces of that set will be perfectly suited to it, and you're basically done. Because those weapon power-ups can't go into any of these slots, there isn't really any hope of adding anything particularly impactful to take over what you threw together initially. You craft the armor pieces and the build is almost completely done. There's next to no swapping in or out or having its capabilities grow with lucky finds. The result is that I had something completely serviceable up to the endgame by around rank 50, and there wasn't really any sign that anything was going to change or become compelling. Sure, I still had to keep grinding for armor level upgrades, and I get a heap of decorations that weren't ever going to take the place of what I was already using, but generally speaking, things felt pretty finished. I'd hit that sensation of not needing to strive for anything that I had with Rise all over again. The main other system I haven't covered through to this point is the Artian weapon system. This system allows you to build weapons of any element or status with comparable output to the weapon tree. Some people are steadfast that they were already way better than the regular upgrade tree, but I don't see it as overly transformative. Here's my off-the-tree paralysis hammer, compared to one that I crafted. The Artian weapon has better affinity, but it's worse in all raw stats. The big advantage is that I'm not locked into exhaust, which, to be honest, is not even in the top 3 skills I'd want in this weapon. But by and large, the difference is negligible. As such, the main value I got from the system is that they're effectively material free to craft since their materials aren't tied to any specific monster. I did an experiment for the next section where I had to make like 40 weapons, so it was a very welcome quality of life option, but I didn't see it as anything more than that. While it's fairly nebulous to define when basic high rank is replaced by endgame, as far as I can tell, this is kind of where the game ended at launch. Baby level easy with nothing to strive for or work at. Like, I'm not even sure if high rank Zoshir was even in it yet. I'm under the impression that there was one rank 8 hunt in the whole game. This largely doesn't matter because you can't play that way anymore, so who really cares about the experience of hypewave riding early adopters a year ago? In fact, I'd say there's actually a really big positive in this. Because the state of the game being the final state of the game is so outdated, it immediately gives away when someone is either completely out of date at best, or at worst, they haven't actually played the game and they're just funneling slop that came out of a ChatGPT prompt. Picture unrelated. With that said, there are still some remnants of this baby game launch mode in here with the high rank story section, with the lack of difficulty before we get into the 8-star and above quests being a legitimate issue. There is an endgame now, but it takes a while to get there. After a super easy and low stress low rank, a super easy and low stress high rank isn't exactly an ideal follow-up. It doesn't last forever, and this phase is absolutely not representative of the overall experience since you'll be out of this tier of content after like 30 hours. But I mean, between this and low rank, I understand the unreasonable of the it gets good after a really long time argument that I'm sort of making. This realization that the whole game is going to be a brainless cakewalk happening exactly when my build progress was stalling out led me to questioning what the point of all of this was. If I'm not creating anything, and I'm not feeling excited about winning in the first place, what am I getting out of all of this? I mean, Monster Hunter is still Monster Hunter, so it wasn't an unpleasant time, but there were no hooks whatsoever. As I said earlier, if I wasn't doing a video, I probably would have stopped around rank 60. A lot has been made of the focused and wound systems. In this phase, I'll admit the wound system is busted. Focus mode is one of those things where I'm a modernity sick of it who doesn't care about your idols. Is it an affront to the initial spirit of the mechanics? Absolutely. Do I care at all? Not in the slightest. I love it. We now have direct aim of our swings and you can now kind of swivel around mid-combo. Yep, it's easy as hell to target, you don't need to commit to a direction when starting attacks, and this makes big commitment bonk weapons insanely easy to use and all that. I don't care if it's not what it used to be, it feels excellent to control, and it's a nice alternative to just resorting to a direct lock-on system like every other game. I want this in every Monster Hunter game going forward. I guess I'm looking at like tank controls in all PS1 games. Yes, they did provide a value and a unique experience, but I don't miss them. The wound system, however, is less brilliant, at least in basic high rank. It's a very simple gimmick. As you attack, wounds open up on the monster, and then you can hit them for bonus damage or hit them with a special move to explode them to cause a stagger and do big percentage base damage instead. This does give you something to aim for, which is a nice use of that focus mode targeting. Staggers are always nice, and big numbers are always fun to look at, but like, it's hitting a glowing red spot. It's no wire bug in terms of gimmick mechanic fun. In pre-endgame high rank, they happen constantly. When you combine this with my paralysis hammer build, which excelled in getting stoppages already, basically everything under rank 8 is just a stagger-locked flailing mess of failure, and it is a bit much. But again, they fixed that going forward, so there's not really much reason to keep banging on about it. Sure, the ability to absolutely body things does make the game easy, but it doesn't theoretically nullify the monsters. Sure, it'll be laying down a lot, but it won't be laying down all the time, and when it's up, you've still got to fight it, right? Well, not if the horse has anything to say about it. The secret problem of high rank. I don't know if the Palamute and Rise had this ability too, and I was just too distracted by the Wirebug zany fun times to notice that there was this simple of a get out of danger option available, but the Sacred basically takes you as close to pause healing as you can get without actually having pause healing. These games have always put as much weight on getting away from monsters as getting close to them. Heals are slow. Like really, really slow. In the past, you'd stand still and do a stupid flex once you were done, and if you got bopped before that was done, you just missed out. These weren't instant heals, it wasn't even dodge to heal, it was get the hell away to heal. In addition to that, you'll need to sharpen your weapon periodically, which takes even longer, and some statuses have salves that take an insufferable time to ingest. As such, getting yourself to safety was a fairly significant part of the loop. It may not have been all that hard, given you can generally just outrun stuff once you're out of the immediate hit zone, but you still did need to clear that initial space. And it's a commitment of time and energy that could inspire some, I reckon I could hold on until the next flea gambles, just because running to a safe place to do your maintenance is going to cost you a better part of a minute. The mount completely removes this in this stage. At any time, you can press up on the D-pad and your horse will run over, pick you up off the ground, and whisk you away at high speed. This allows you to do all your healing and buffing in an instant, and if that wasn't enough, you get a free mounting attack on your way back. It's pretty busted. Now of course, it's not a surefire thing. The horse chicken is an actual character on the map at all times, rather than something spawned in when you hit the button, so there is some variance in the timing and angle of rescue, and sometimes it'll get you hit. I'd say 8 times out of 10 it'll work exactly as expected. You'll hit the button, and within a couple of seconds it'll charge in and carry you to safety. 1 time in 10 it'll be knocked over or just be a really long way away, resulting in it showing up so late that it's no longer relevant. And 1 time in 10 it'll pick you up in a timely manner but run you straight into a nearby wall or into the monster itself, preventing the instant escape. So that's a 20% chance of failure. Sounds like a pretty decent deterrent to spam, right? Now factor in that for all those failures, it needs to be punished. The enemy needs to be making a follow-up attack that can hit you. Just because your horse screwed you over doesn't mean that the monster won't miss anyway, or be in a recovery period, or be distracted by cats or whatever. Let's be generous and say that it's hitting you half the time on those mount blunders. So now we have a 90% success rate for just panic mashing the chicken whenever you get hit. But we're not done. Even if you do get screwed over by the idiot, paste-eating bird, it then needs to actually have consequences. And in this stage of the game, it really doesn't. So assuming that you cop that raw 10% deal of getting hit by fleeing, unless the hit is big enough to finish you off or trigger a fresh stagger lock sequence to kill you, it doesn't really matter. You can just hit up again after the follow-up hit and roll the 90% survival dice roll again until it works. Again, let's be generous and say that the monsters have a 25% chance of delivering a finish-off damage hit, even at these lower ranks. So now we're down to a mere 97.5% chance of getting out of danger completely scot-free with a simple up press every time you see your health drop down to like 2/3. And that's being pretty pessimistic, I feel. Through what I would consider to be regular high rank, I carded maybe 8 times in total. Almost every one of these times was admittedly because the stupid horse ran me into a Ceregios dive combo or something, but compared to the hundreds of times it worked just fine, it really is a non-issue. The bird is broken as hell. So after these first 2 portions of the game, I've been horribly underwhelmed by one, and found the other one kinda passable but brain dead and limiting. Things were looking grim, and from how I'd seen talk about the endgame, I didn't have particularly high hopes. Endgame. I'm actually going to jump straight into the sacred complaint portion of this one, partially because it directly flows off the prior issue, and partially because I'm a wildcard that you can never predict. Obviously, moving up to the 8, 9 and 10 star quests, solving the difficulty complaint was a major goal of the developers with the title updates. And credit where it's due, they pulled that off. There is way harder stuff in the post-title update things. The problem comes with how they've done it. Much like with the low rank situation, I don't envy their plight. With where high rank had left things off difficulty wise, what options did they have? Obviously toning down the wounds was a must do, and they nailed that assignment perfectly. Regular wounds don't cause a full stagger anymore, and they appear like 10% as often, while tempered wounds give that satisfaction of a nice knockdown but are much rarer. It's basically perfect now, full marks. I think that every single monster should have a version at this level because it's a plainly superior way to go about it. But then there's how you deal with the bloody horse. The secret problem of Endgame. If you have a game mechanic that offers near instant safe healing, how do you make that difficult? There's really only one option available: one-shotting. The mount alone makes it near impossible to make a boss that creates difficulty through pressure or moveset complexity, because players can just nope out at any time. You've got to kill people before they have the chance. So good God are the 9 and 10 star quests full of monsters that can either straight up one-shot you or have lethal double taps. And it kinda sucks, particularly for multiplayer. Obviously, there's an argument that skill trumps all here, and the best way to avoid getting juggled or stun killed is just to not get hit in the first place. but aside from the top like 5% of players, I think it's pretty fair to say that it has added a degree of randomness to how fights play out. Not so much that the moves are random or impossible to read, it's just that if you happen to cop an unlucky follow-up or an attack you didn't see coming, there really isn't much you can do about it anymore. It's pretty rare to get worn down into a cart, you just die all of a sudden, and it's not really my favourite thing in the world. It does get mitigated as you gear up through the tiers. I remember my first rank 9 enemy, a lowly Kut-Ku, which I thought would be a light and easy introduction. Rank 8 stuff had been a breeze, and I was feeling pretty invincible, and it immediately clipped me with one of its runabout goof-off moves and put me into red health. Sure, it's now only like a 40% health hit with the fully upgraded gear, but that's a hell of a jump. And by the end game stuff, yeah, a Gogmazios, Arch-Tempered Arkveld, Rank 10 Ronpompolo, Omega, Tempered Ceregiast, or even a lowly Rank 9 Doshigama can totally one-shot you or double-tap you, even with maxed out gear. Basically everything in the last 2 tiers can drop that double-tap 470 armor rating insta-kill. Even a few of the 8s can. While I definitely don't enjoy dying like this, it's generally only a mild frustration. Where it becomes a problem is the multiplayer. These total wipes are rare enough that playing solo, it's probably not going to happen 3 times in a 15 to 20 minute fight. But for many people, this is a co-op game. Having it happen once in a fight at these levels isn't uncommon, so the chances of happening once to 3 people in a single quest is alarmingly high. I do my single clear solo run to claim my skill cred, and then after that I'm always playing with others because I'm not particularly interested in re-skill testing that same test another 30 to 150 times. I need the flair and buzz of having different collections of hunters all doing their own things, making their silly jokes, and forgetting their mics are on to keep it fresh. This results in the failure rate being agonizingly high for a game where you're rolling 2% drops over and over. It's so high that I felt the need to get some statistical backing for that vibe, so I ran a little experiment. I took on an 8-star Ray Dow, a 9-star Arch-Tempered Newudra, a 10-star Arch-Tempered Arkveld, and both raid bosses with every single weapon in the game. Then I checked how well over this pool of more than 70 fights, how good our clear rate was. Now, it's not the most scientific experiment ever. When I did this, I'd never actually beaten Omega, and I'd never even fought Gogmazios. So I was still obviously very bad at those fights at the time of tracking. Importantly, sometimes the Gog fight was the 5 lives version, and sometimes it was the 3 lives version, which is important because those have very different clear rates, and not for the reason that you'd think. The 5 lives version can only be started by someone who has not yet beaten him, so that means that every time you join that hunt, there is at least one player who doesn't know what they're doing. Until you see it clear on my results, I am that player. So the 3 life model actually has a dramatically higher clear rate based solely on everyone involved having at least some idea of what's happening. To this day, I love trying to help new players, but it really is disheartening playing for like 4 hours straight and getting 2 clears. Another area where the study is not in an optimal state is that by using every single weapon, I am exposing myself to some fights that just do not mesh well with certain weapons, such as Newudra with anything that requires you to stand in the fire aura range, or Omega with anything that attacks in a narrow line. Also, there are some weapons I am simply incompetent at, so I kinda tanked it for everyone. Sorry for everyone involved in my longsword and bow attempts. My bad. The final shortcoming is my build, where I had the genius idea to make an all-in-one survivalist build and just bolt in the weapons. It's a Defense Boost 7 Regen Fiend build with over 550 raw defense. It sounded good on paper, but in practice it meant that my low DPS was making the fights last like 4 minutes longer than they should, and secondly, most of the fights are much better handled with suitable elemental defenses that I do not have, particularly the 3 fire ones. Oh well, I can't go back now, and I'm not doing it again, so here's the results. 4 in 10. That goes down to 1 in 4 if we ignore the Ray Dow, which is an extremely easy monster. Obviously, I played my part in this. I wish I was more dishonest because I did not cover myself in glory with the spreadsheet looking over my shoulder, particularly on Arkveld since I generally think I'm pretty good at him, and I died in nearly half the attempts here. But overall, I think it demonstrates the overwhelming rate of failure well. I'm not knocking my teammates, I wasn't much better in my armor set literally built for survival, admittedly poorly. Sudden instacarts are just something that happens. and the chances of having to summon 3 times per fight is pretty high. To try and tidy up the whole "the build is awful" problem, I tracked my last 12 GOG hunts on my pretty tolerable proper anti-GOG build while I was chasing a gem, and I came out with a 5-win, 7-loss record despite me personally carding only twice across that entire stretch. This is solely doing the everyone has beaten it version of the hunt. It's just something that happens. Something that happens often enough to waste over an hour and a half on failed quests, not including reset times, while trying to gain a single material. I've had some fights where the internet dropped out and it's brought in support hunters, and I've never lost one of those fights. My first ever Omega win was with one of those with the longsword, and as I've said, and as you can see by my performance on the chart, I am terrible at. Hell, once I had the connection drop out on a 10-star tempered New Udra, and it didn't even give me support hunters, so I had to do the whole thing true solo with it at 4-player health, and I still didn't lose because even though it took 45 minutes, the chances of an individual eating all of those 3 get-screwed attacks in a single bout is fairly low. I love the support hunters being in the game. They're absolutely not a tenth as enjoyable as real people, but this is the only one which is going to have some legs for me in the long term once the servers die, because I don't need to then play the entire grind in solo mode. When the best advice that you can give someone struggling in your co-op game is to stop doing co-op, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. And that's all the damn Secret's fault. The secret, not sacred awesomeness of the endgame. So now we're at an important part of the video, because I'm out of bad things to say. That's right, we're finally into the actually it's the best one portion. I like that Monster Hunter lets people play in so many different ways. I don't get it when I see people talking about how they played the game for hundreds of hours completely offline purely in pursuit of skill expression. I'm over that after a single solo kill, but it's cool that these games can offer such differing but equally enthralling experiences to different people. Some people want to speedrun, some people want to play Frontiersman, some people want to craft the ultimate perfect build, some people want to collect titles and monster-sized crowns, some people want to craft absolutely everything, some people want to just hang out with their friends, some people want to do the low quests and help total newbies over and over. There's stuff for so many different types of people. And for people like me, Monster Hunter Wilds is damn good eating. For me, the hook is build crafting and progression. Don't get me wrong, I love killing. I wouldn't be hanging around this long if I didn't like stabbing up the loot and pinatas also, but what really locks me in is seeing what build options there are, slowly putting it all together, swapping things around as new options open up, and just letting all these things grow until I have something that I'm happy with. They're not necessarily perfect ultimate builds or anything, but there are things that get to a solid baseline of pretty good. World's way of providing this was a mono build. A singular, powerful build that I keep adapting and building off of from start to finish. Thanks to the free spam of gem slots, any useful gem I could find could massively change my approach. Maybe I'd move some critical boost off an armor piece into my gem slots, allowing me to swap in a completely different piece of armor that would allow me to start targeting another factor of the dream build at the same time. With that system, you could really keep to maxing out one set for dozens or even hundreds of hours. The progression could grow and morph that much. The problem with this is that it did end up as just one singular powerful build. I stopped before Iceborne, so for me it was the Extremis set. I think the same thing was transferred over to Fatalis afterwards, where it was so good and was such an ideal base for maxing out all of your raw damage and critical hit options that it eventually became the basis of a glorious mono build to rule all builds. Maybe I'd swap out a piece or two to better serve if I was using a shielded or ranged weapon, but basically, once it was done, every weapon was done. You'd slot in a weapon of choice and it would basically work the same. Now again, because of the flexibility offered in the construction, this process still took me into the hundreds of hours of joyous farming, so it was definitely enough, but it did give me a pretty obvious bailout point once I'd gotten all of my rare decoration drops and it was clear that all I had left to do was get completely unreasonable Talisman or Kulve Taroth drops. As I said, I don't care about speedrunning or perfection, so at that point the progression was halted barring 1 in 1,000 god rolls, so I bailed. Satisfied and enamoured for sure, but I bailed nonetheless. Wilds, however, has a system which basically lets that beautiful creation and polishing phase last like 6 times as long, and I love it. Yes, I am talking about the widely hated Gogmazius weapon system. I get the complaints about the GOG system. I really do. It clashes horrendously with a number of really common playstyles. It completely kills the rewards for messing with the highest rank hunts. If you're the type of person who wants that world type 1 build to rule them all structure, you're in for a world of hurt trying to get new weapons to slot perfectly into what you've already made. If you're a speedrunner who just wants to have the ultimate high production builds for every record that you're chasing, you're going to want to eat your TV. If you're a single weapon ultra main who just wants to use your one weapon and have it being as perfect as you can possibly have it, you're going to absolutely hate it. But those people aren't me. That's not what I'm after. I want to make vaguely usable builds and make their numbers go up. The Gogmazius system is a goddamn build prompt generator, and it makes me gorge on hedonistic joyous greed until I can't walk, and I could not be any happier. I don't have a main. I change weapons constantly. I'll build around monsters and what I find annoying or fun about them. Peak efficiency be damned. None of my builds in any crazy looter game I've ever played has ever been a meta level peaked ultra build. They're just as good as I can sloppily put together, and that's fine. I'm not in it to be the best. I'm in it to watch numbers go up through any means necessary. If anything, having them not approach that peak output makes this work even better since there's more room for little bumps. This system is an invitation to do this over and over and over and over, and I cannot get enough of it. What the GOG weapon system does is that it lets you boost those Ardean weapons I mentioned earlier to a level that, yeah, they are just dramatically better than anything on the crafting tree. One part of this is just the numbers, which are just plain better, but that's all pretty boring. All that does is kill the crafting tree. It does this by letting you re-roll those stat boost numbers on your Ardean weapons and give them an extra boost. This is kind of a big deal. With the regular Ardean system, you got to roll your stat boosts once. If they were bad, or God forbid, mid, you'd need to craft a whole new weapon and start again. Making an Ardean weapon costs 3 relics rewarded from rank 8, 9, and 10 hunts. But with the old system, you'd likely need several sets of these 3 relics before you are happy. Now you genuinely just need 3, making it absolutely pointless to farm top-end monsters or get those weekly quest reward tickets. That all sounds pretty bad. Part of me doesn't mind cleaning up the re-rolling of stats because it was slow, expensive, and boring, but there's another thing that it does that I absolutely love about it. It also adds an armor skill and a secondary group armor skill to the weapon. This is where things get incredible/abhorrent depending on your taste. If you play like me, and only if you play like me, this is perfection. There's 3 tiers of using these weapons, and I utilized all of them to some degree. Tier 1 is simply taking a worthwhile weapon skill and building around that, ignoring everything else. So I'd pick what monster I wanted to kill, choose a weapon that suits how I fight it, like a spear for Arkveld or a switch axe for Omega, and then pick the element that works best on it. And then I just roll a weapon. There are 21 set bonuses that can show up in a GOG weapon, and I'd say a solid 15 of those are usable in some context. Some of them will really only suit some weapons well, like the offset attack triggered skill, which you'll want a weapon which you can trigger offsets on, but by and large, in this tier, if you re-roll even 3 times, you'll get something that you can use. This is fantastic because it determines your build. You're not just setting up some singular best DPS build and bolting a weapon onto it, the weapon is telling you what random hodgepodge of skills you're going to try to make work. Is there any world where I would have made a build around the cheesy skill that lets you buff the squad a little bit with an emote normally? Hell no. Or how about the one that inflicts you with Water Blight? Not a chance. But when they win the Gogma lottery, why the hell not? Let's see what value I can pull out of it. Just a heads up, I'm going to go into a really in-depth example here, just to really drive home what's going on and why I get so much out of it. It's full of extremely dry technical details and decision-making processes that has no value whatsoever beyond the broad points I just made. It's very self-indulgent and time-consuming, and I'm saying that at the 50-minute mark of a video that was initially intended to be a 5-minute intro. So I'm going to put a timestamp up right now if you don't want to watch the entire process of how build making works in this system. Please skip to there so you can just keep looking at my broader arguments if that sounds incredibly boring to you, because it probably is. It just isn't to me, and I just want to really show why it fills me with so much childlike glee in painful detail, because this system is so insanely unpopular for any other playstyle. So anyway, you've been warned. Here's the example. Right now, I don't have an anti-Gravios build. A jerk-ass armored dragon that spews AoEs everywhere, has like 4 elements it can inflict, and has no weak points until you break its belly. I also don't have a build that uses a hunting horn. I think these things suck to fight with anything that isn't a ranged weapon, but I already have an assortment of firearms, and everyone is always getting hit by their BS anyway, so screw it. Hunting horn to help everyone deal with the lazy-looking slow-mo flailing and melee mashing AoEs it is. Complete lack of ability to defend myself from that same BS be damned. So I look up what it's weak to in the field guide, and then I go off to make a water hunting horn. Sadly, the hunting horn's melodies are determined by its type, and the elemental ones don't come with the DPS or recovery songs that I'd like. But I suppose that the elemental damage and blight recovery should come in handy, so it'll do. Then it's just a quick first roll to see what stat boosts I get, which are fine. So it's time to gog it up, which, as you can see, has already boosted our attack by 40 at a slight cost to affinity, but that's no big deal. Now, since I'm ignoring the more advanced GOG building elements on this tier, I can ignore the group skill and check out the weapon skill, which has a 71% chance of naturally being something usable. My default here was a pretty big boost to Resentment, a skill that gives bonus raw attack while you have a red health bar after receiving damage. Generally, it's a god-awful skill with putrid uptime, but it isn't a terrible option here since there's no 10-star Gravios, so it's not super unsafe to keep fighting after taking some whacks. My hammer doesn't have recovery songs to cancel the effect by accident, and I've never built around it, because who would? So why not now? Screw it, we'll save the re-rolling for next tier. For now, we're making a Resentment build and seeing how much uptime we can get with our plus 93 raw damage whenever we have recoverable health. This is what I'm getting at here. It's not a smart build, it absolutely won't be a top-end build, but it will be something new and fun to play with. So I rolled an upgrade on my arty and stat buffs, I got trash but I'll fix it up later, and got to build crafting. I had to decide if I wanted the 2 or 4 piece bonus to the Resentment boost set. Obviously, since I'm building around it, I want the 4, so then I needed to figure out which 3 pieces of new Udra gear I'd like with it. I took the Arch-Tempered arms for a nice batch of slots and 3 points of Resentment, the chest for 2 more level 3 decoration slots and Counter-Strike, which will meld well with a build designed around getting hit, and the non-tempered waist for yet another top level decoration slot while maxing out Resentment. Now I had to decide on a secondary set bonus for my head and legs. I didn't mind the look of Gravios Protection, a skill that lets you take half damage when hit from full health, which would fit in well, but the Gravios set gave me a recovery speed boost which I had feared would reduce my time in Resentment mode. Gingerhard's bonus damage after getting Trap skill could work well assuming I get frostbitten a few times, but with it only having 1 minute's uptime with only one method of triggering it, I ruled against it. The Legiacra set's Azure Bolt is always nice bonus damage, but with the Gravios not having any weak points for a third of the fight, I feel like it wouldn't do a huge amount on the affinity front. The extended duration of the affinity boosting latent power skill provided by Ray Dow's set also appealed, given I'd be taking damage and therefore triggering it at a faster rate than the usual timer method. But ironically, because that damage would be triggering it anyway, the extra duration felt unneeded since I'd simply re-trigger it more often naturally. I thought Gore Magala's interesting mechanic of automatically inflicting you with a status so you can reap the rewards of curing it would be blocked by how few low-level decoration slots the new Udra stuff offered, since it requires 7 level 1 slots to function well while maintaining elemental defense and shockproof. But it turns out that the pieces themselves offer a pretty decent amount of them. However, given this build's complete lack of affinity and low attack speed, an extra 10% most of the time wouldn't really do a whole lot. Seregios Tenacity would allow me to quadruple down on raw attack boosts, but the added duration would come in handy given Gravios doesn't offer that many iframe dodge opportunities to power it. On the downside, the bleed resistant points that would come with it would be completely worthless. The Gogmazios set is interesting in that it comes with secondary set bonuses, allowing me to opt into other sets while only using one direct piece of it. Most interestingly here would be the option to avoid that point of recovery speed boost that scared me away from the Gravios Protection build. Ignoring that sort of cross-pathing, however, its own bonus of boosting elemental damage when the monster is enraged would also be fairly handy, and it would give me a precious level 2 slot of which I'd need several for the E-plugs and part breaker parts. given how talkative these monsters are and how important breaking the belly quickly is. At this point, I had many options, but none that were perfect. So why not look into the intentionally imperfect? Rather than getting a second set bonus, I could lean super hard into my desire for many mid-level slots. The Rathalos legs could give me a pair of level 2 skills and a single, with some always welcome evasion boost. The Zhuwu could do the same with that bonus damage on dodge bonus from before. Arcajan's legs could give me 2 points in Part Breaker along with 2 level 2 slots, allowing me to almost cover the entire functionality of my build in one fell swoop. For the helmets, the new Udarom could give me multiple level 2s while maxing out my Counter-Strike boost, but it would overstock me on my resentment, causing me to completely rework my 3 locked-in pieces. Plus it would make me look like I enjoy Sleep Token. The Guardian Rathalos would make for a totally worthless set bonus with the legs, but it would give me 2 more slots and some weakness exploit for after the belly breaks. Darhard would give me 2 and some enraged monster bonus. Lagiacrus would give me the 2 biggies and a small one and some bonus damage before I get hit. Uthduna would provide that full health bonus damage and some earplugs. There are some combos here where I'd have too many level 2 slots, despite initially ideally seeking 6 of them. The Archtemper Darhard could be paired with those Arcajan legs to give me 2 more triple deco slots and some bonus damage whenever I'm fighting with poisoners or paralyzers. The Orion Cap would let me take that plus another free 1 slot and pair with flinch resistance to avoid getting staggered out of my tunes. The Gala suit would give me plenty of Divine Blessing to improve my survivability while being deliberately smacked around. And there's the slick sunglasses that do it neat and tidy with lots of post-broken belly damage. But in the end, after all that, I found something that I couldn't pass up. The Bale set. A set which has the exact same trigger as Resentment. The only problem with it is that it also comes with Resentment, which would force me to go back to my original choices of New Udra gear to use ones that didn't max that out. The Constitution would be worthless, but it would gain me latent power, burst, and a heap of useful slots. After all of that initial building around my initial set, I had to change it up. Admittedly, in terms of pure usefulness, I think that the Arcajan legs mixed with one of the more generous helmets and no set bonus would be the best option to take, but I couldn't pass up the extra levels of stacking on this single proc for the comedy of it. So now we have armor. Hooray! Now what? Well, now we need to gem and talisman it. First, I need to consider what weapon-specific skills are essential for the build. Usually, a hammer of any kind would ask for headshotting knockout power, but since Gravios is all about hitting the belly, we won't need that. We will, however, need Horn Maestro to make our songs last longer, and I already have a choice to make. Obviously, there are Hornmaster decorations I can slot straight into one of our 3 weapon slots, and I have a bunch of options with secondary skills to go with it, from more attack powers to more criticals to better draw attacks to more sharpness, to some of that knockout power that I was neglecting. But I can also get it through talismans with a fair range of additional choices. I could go in with some points towards earplugs or part breaker to cover for my lack of level 2 armor slots, or I could not max out the Maestro itself and give myself a big boost in any of those other skills, or give my defense a leg up given I'm intentionally taking damage all the time. If I decide to leave my Horn Maestro on the weapon gems, I could then start looking at attack boosting talismans. With options utilizing a level 2 boost, I could max the skill with a weapon gem and then take some useful support skills. If I went up to level 3 with a bonus single slot to get me up to 4, I could nullify his poison or gain a resentment point to force me to redesign my armor choices again. In the end, I opted for the defense-leaning level 2 attack boost, and locked in 2 slots of my weapon with the Horn Maestro and attack boost decorations. For the final slot, I had a choice between 4 gems. There was critical rate and critical damage to help cover for my low base affinity, even with latent power covering some slack. And I had a critical element / level 1 water damage jewel which would carry in the post-broken belly portion of the hunt. But in the end, with raw dumbass damage being the focus of the build, I took a triple water attack one to make the Bale armor effect a little sillier and add a tiny bit more sharpness. So that's our weapon dealt with. Now it's time for the armor. I start with the level 1s, always starting with the anti-trip one so I don't send everyone flying with my big sweeps. Don't be a jerk-ass, dual blade users. Just like all of you. What's wrong with you people? Next were 3 fire resistances to nullify all of his breath attacks and boost the roar by another helpful 10 points. I gave another slot to Divine Blessing, so he get another 20% total damage reduction when it triggers. And finally, I took 2 levels of Antidote because Poison is annoying. Now, I jumped up to the level 3s and topped off my Latent Power for a big affinity boost once the belly was broken. As expected, I did run low on level 2 slots, so I only put 1 point into Part Breaker, which is definitely lower than I'd like, but I prefer the second point of Earplugs given they have a strong roar and they spam it a lot. So this at least tones that down even if it doesn't completely nullify it. So with the level 3s being a basic batch of affinity boosters, we're done here. So welcome back people who skipped all of that. Did I just spend 3 hours making a completely terrible novelty build and organizing screenshots because a random number generator told me to? Yep, sure did. And I loved every single second of it. It's not even done. Because this armor was new, I still had 8 hours of farming armor spheres to get it survivable. But the point is that, even if you skip that, you can see by just how far you had to skip forward, how many decisions I had to make while putting this together. This system creates these events constantly. I have builds for like 15 monsters. Several of them multiples because I ended up not liking how the weapon vibed with the monster, or I didn't like how it carried up to the higher difficulties. For instance, I really like my Lagiacrus Killer Insect Glaive build, which cuts up anything 7 stars and down in mere minutes, but the lack of defensive options while accessing that crazy DPS does make the harder versions pretty insufferable, pushing me to make a gunner version, only to discover that he's basically immune to guns anywhere other than the face, so I needed to make a third one to incorporate something with a shield. Each one of these setups are completely different builds with different core skills involving completely different armors. I've used so many more of the armor sets and their combinations than I ever would have otherwise, and for what I want out of the game, it's just perfect. Absolutely perfect. But of course, we can go deeper. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into the silly degree of detail this time, but let's have a look at Tier 2 of GOG Mazios weapon building. Tier 2 is getting a viable group skill to go along with your viable armor skill. Group skills are like a bonus set of armor skills, with the non-insignificant caveat that they almost all totally suck. There are 17 of these in the game. One of them is just always amazing, one of them is an excellent companion to exactly 2 builds, and another is a solid choice for one singular weapon type. The other 14 are completely worthless. It's absolutely stupid having one which gives a flat 5% bonus damage for the whole fight with a free extra life, which turns into a 5% defense bonus if you happen to trigger that free life, sat next to stuff like improved honey gathering or increased gathering speed. So this is about an 18% chance of rolling any type of useful group skill, or 6% for the universally good one. So already we're at the almost 20 rolls space, but that's multiplied by the chance of getting a useful other skill to go with it. This was at 71% with me being extremely non-picky, so we're down to some pretty low hit rates. We're talking 12.6% if we just look at the simple math of it, but given 2 of those group skills require a narrower range of builds to work, the actual outcome would be somewhere on the way to the Lord Soul only figure of 4%. It's not so rare that it becomes unworthy of consideration. This is what I do in all of my second draft builds, and it tends to hit within 20 to 30 rolls, but as we've seen, I'm pretty damn generous with what I call a useful set bonus. If you're pickier than me here, we can be looking at around the 40 to 60 roll range already. This tier adds a little more restriction on the actual build making portion, so it won't be as simple as chucking your new weapon onto that existing build. Now you'll also want a couple of pieces to tie in with your group bonus. This does result in you falling back on a few builds which are on the armor pieces that provide said group bonus. Almost anything I have Lord Soul on is going to utilize Ray Dow or Lagiacrus sets in some way, while anything with Lord's Fury is going to be a Gore Magala build. It doesn't produce as many or as wacky build ideas, but it absolutely creates another tier of them to use. It's a bit more work for sure, but the improvement is noticeable and it gave me a bunch more to do, so I'm still all in. It's a nice middle ground between taking it seriously and still being willing to not fully no-life it. Tier 3, however, is where it loses me, and makes all the min-maxes extremely unendingly sad. Tier 3 is doing the world thing. You figure out exactly what build would be the best possible damn thing that you could have on a certain weapon and monster combination, and you roll for that. I'm going to leave the Gravios build aside for that since I have a clearer, active example with my anti-GOG Mazios build, which lets me avoid a tedious explanation of why I need certain things and how it all works. Basically, Gogmazius is a unique boss in that he has multiple phases that pretty much demand varying elemental typing. Phase 1 and 2 are weak to fire, and then Phase 3 is weak to dragon with a repeating DPS check timer on it. Technically, you could just run dragon the whole time since the first two phases don't have a timer, but generally speaking, you're gonna want both. My dragon element switch axe here is a tier 2 special. I took the first thing I could imagine building around that came with Lord Soul, and it's a silly, very non-meta thing which uses an emote to buff everyone else in the fight a tiny little bit. It's utterly useless in most cases, and it's probably still useless here, but with the fight having like 8 support hunters in it, I figured, why not? Let's get a little bit silly with it. The issue is the Phase 1 and 2 fire weapon. There is no room for it to do anything different within itself. My armor is perfectly designed to pair with my axe. For this thing to be as effective as it can be, it needs to roll exactly the same skills. This is a 1 in 21 multiplied by a 1 in 17. No wiggle room found. Math quiz. What's the chance of that happening? I'll save you the effort. It's 1 in 357 rolls. 0.28%. So yeah, the whole time I've been talking about Tier 3, I've been showing footage of me spending $400,000 re-rolling my stabber repeatedly. Needless to say, that build will be forever imperfect. This is what it takes to make a top-end min-maxed build. It's an RNG hell of unfathomable scale. Again, I don't care. I'm not bothered by that last 5% performance quality I'm leaving on the table, but there are a lot of very popular playstyles that do. I feel and see your plight, even if it's totally a million times worth it for me. So with me expressing empathy done, I'm going to talk about how I want this to be worse. Sorry. This isn't the only layer of randomness. Honestly, it's not even the worst one because you can at least kind of focus on it. Sure, it'll be expensive as hell, but you can farm up 3.5 million Zenny and 1,000 Gogma parts and just run your 357 rolls in a row to get what you want. It's deranged, and I'd never do it, but you can do it. There is worse RNG in the game. In that Gravios building section that you either endured or skipped, there actually were a couple of parts where I was lacking things, even after over 500 Hunter Acts and over 300 hours of playtime. Most top tier weapon jewels can come with a secondary, and on that water attack gem, I took a pretty worthless handicraft with it. Because, hey, may as well take something. I'm pretty sure I could roll one with an attack up, which would have let me have more freedom on my talisman choice, and maybe free up that attack 3 boost gem that I used, or just give a critical upgrade of some kind to have a straight improvement. The chances of that though, well, they're utterly disgusting. The numbers on this next part might be a little bit dodgy. I more or less just counted off lists off wikis, so I may have gotten the count slightly wrong, but it should be close enough. I'd need to roll a water attack 3, which is already a 1 in 41 by my count, and then I'd need that to have a bonus skill point on it, which I can't find the chance of online. I'm going to guess at around 25%, but it really is just a vibe number there. And then that bonus skill needs to be one of the 3 things that I'm looking out for. Not every skill can show up there. You can't get Horn Master or Charge Master as a bonus, for instance, but my count is still 32. All up, that's a 0.08% chance of the best in-slot gem happening. 1 in over 5,000, and I'd want this up to 3 times. Admittedly, there are 3 combinations I'd accept, taking me up to a healthy 0.24 in any of them. Obviously, this is some knackered math, but I think I'm in the ballpark. Oh, and I forgot to say, you get like 8 rolls of this per well-selected hunt. And the talismans have the same thing. I could get an attack boost 3, 2-slotted talisman with a secondary latent power, burst, critical boost, or weakness exploit on it. I'm not even going to try and math this crap out, but it's just as rare, if not rarer, with an even slower rate of rolling. The God roll grind is unfathomably severe. The thing is, for me, good enough is good enough. And there is plenty of good enough. The stuff I have there isn't perfect, but, you know, I'm losing like 1 to 2% damage output on each, maybe up to 5 if they create some kind of synergy. I don't really care. I may not have the perfect Water Attack 3 gem, but I do have like 40 Water Attack 3 gems of some kind, and some of them even have situationally useful bonuses. There's a nice steady excitement of seeing what rolls in these things for a solid 150 to 200 hours, at which point the strike rate gets so insanely low that it fades. Tiers 1 and 2 of the Gogmazios weapon system hold my attention for much longer than that. It gets to the point where I'm still having fun making new builds, but I run out of reward bait while I'm building them. I don't mind that I'm never going to get the god rolls, but there's a drop in pace once I run out of good enough rolls. There's one quest which drops a ridiculously high number of armor spheres that obviously I just needed to run a silly amount of times, but god damn it, I don't want to fight any more Lagiacrus or Rathalos. I want a reason to break it up, and the decoration and talisman likelihood is so low that I've got no reason to engage with the high-end stuff anymore. I want more random things with tiny individual boosts. This next little bit of hypothetical dream crafting is 1,000,000% fantasy and not a good idea for them to add to the game in reality. It would be another level of hell for all those players who do care about getting things as polished as they can possibly get, and it would send the power creep madness to a whole nother level. I don't care about any of that. I just want to be excited to roll the RNG roulette for as long as it remains viable, and I like it when numbers go up, and I don't care about the sanctity of speedrun fairness or difficulty purity, so you're just going to have to humour me. What I imagine is a crazy system of mini talismans. Let's call them bangles for the sake of easy differentiation. These bangles would take the place of like half the Artian roll loot or be directly built out of the relics. How they'd function would be randomly assigned to an armor piece, not one that you have, just any random piece in the giant crafting list, right down to the fashion distinction version. 1 in 1,000 for any specific piece. Then it could be attached to that single, solitary armor piece as an extra bonus doohickey. And then they get more random again. They'd have an innate value to start with, a very basic stack boost, regular defense, elemental attack, raw attack, affinity, HP, whatever. Just any basic stat and they come in tiers. Half of them would be +2, 40% would be +5, and 10% would offer a +8. Maybe varying in those exact volumes by the stat being boosted, so maybe the crit stuff would be a straight 1, 2, 3 to not get too silly. But that's not all. Half of them would stop there. A nice little treat, but nothing more. But 30% of them would offer a slot. 15% of them would offer 2 slots, and the remaining 5% would offer 3. I'm thinking I'd let the answer be special in that they'd use weapon slots instead of armor ones, but at this point we're so far down the designing imaginary mechanics pipeline that we won't imagine any extra detail. So the theoretical end result of this is that you're now getting like 10 rolls per fight at these things that have like a 1 in 50 chance of being linked to something that you have on some build. Then those have another degree of rarity to be particularly useful. Because there's so many ways for them to go and so many places they can be helpful, it's going to take an eternity to hit that, everything I have is pretty good, I don't really care what I get now, breakpoint, that kills my most loved portion of the game. Obviously, for those who do care about having their stuff maxed out, this idea is a death sentence. The purity of speedrunning would be totally thrown out by some guy randomly having 20% more damage than everybody else. So it's not remotely plausible, and don't do it. But this portion of the game is where the hooks start to fall out for me, and with the Gogma weapon system, it's happened a lot earlier than I've run out of bigger macro goals. I want the little progressive rewards phase to last as long as the build spamming phase. It's hit a point where I'm still not bored of Wilds yet, but I am bored of basically only running the Armor Sphere bomb quest, the Potion Crafting Material quest, and the Gogma Machine Powering quest. I think this is a good place to end this thing. It may not sound unusual to MMO players or the live service addicts or just generally people who like playing games for years on end, but for me, this is unusual. I'm not done with Monster Hunter Wilds. There's still a lot more I want to achieve in it. I just ran out of ways for it to reward me before I hit that final point. This isn't something that happens to me very often. When I finished Bloodborne, I still had a lot of ways for it to reward me left. I had spare blood rocks that I could have hung around with and used up, or I could have gone chalice diving to get gems for an actually viable arcane build, but I'd run out of game long before that. This is how most games go for me. I still have progression systems rolling long after I've run out of content to explore. With Wilds, I still have a dozen monsters I want to make builds for. I still have a few skill combinations I haven't explored properly. I still haven't had a roll at a true tier 3 god roll setup. There are high-end monsters that I haven't completely worked out yet. I have plenty more that I want to retrieve in the game after an, honestly, just disgusting amount of time spent. I haven't run out of game, I've run out of feeling like my time investment is getting paid off. This has been a weird video to make because of its inherently short lifespan. I made a jab earlier about the arguments from the launch period being obsolete and irrelevant now, but that's what this is going to be the second that expansion hits. It's not just going to be more, it's going to be an overhaul. All of this gushing about endgame systems will be gone, like tears in the rain. I guess I need to embrace it, but it is an interesting experience knowingly making something that's merely going to be a time capsule of this specific time in the game. All those Bitter Wilds videos from a year ago aren't wrong, they're just not relevant anymore. They're newspaper clippings archives, and I guess that's what this will be now too. So, I hope you enjoyed nihilistically thinking about the fleeting nature of time and the impermanence of your achievements. Sweet dreams!